That's about most of my Hungarian, so I'll switch to English if you don't mind. I've been with AWS for almost 5 years, and I had the privilege to work with customers from startups to enterprises in 8 different countries and help them with the journey to the cloud. And I would like to show a few use cases here and the patterns that I had a chance to see. When I'm in the first discussion with a new customer, one of the first questions usually is like, why do you want to move to the cloud? And under normal circumstances, you would expect that they answer, yeah, because of the lower costs. Yes, but no. Cost is usually not the first reason why customers want to move to the cloud. The reason, number one, is elasticity and agility. What it means in the practice. I suppose that you know a company that's called Airbnb. These guys offer online short-term rents of houses or flats somewhere all around the world. And they are a very good customer of AWS. So far, I checked yesterday their numbers, so I have the updates. They have 150 million users and more than 5 million listings worldwide. Trust me, each and every hotel chain would kill for those numbers. So in 2013, when they had only 4 million customers, they saw unprecedented growth because within the year and a half, approximately, they got 10 million more users. The same was the amount of servers, virtual servers, or EC2 instances that they used. They started around 432 in 2013, and they grew up by almost 1,000 within a year with 5-person operations team. Imagine having that scale and the ability to operate with such amount of people, 5, on premises. Impossible, I guarantee you that. So this is why to the cloud, but why AWS? You probably saw some reasons today. I will try to summarize them somehow. So first is the platform depth and breadth. It's the sheer amount of services that we offer and the functionality that is part of those services. Second are the cost savings. We'll speak a little bit about that in a moment. Agility and elasticity, I already mentioned. You can go global in minutes. So regardless, where are your customers, whether they are in Hungary, whether they are in larger Europe, or whether they are in South America, Australia, Asia, you can go very easily to deploy new infrastructure in those regions and serve the customers as close as possible. And last but not least is the security. AWS has the largest number of startup customers and as well the largest numbers of enterprise customers. Question, how are these companies moving to AWS? Well, for startups, it's pretty easy, right? They don't have this burden of the past infrastructure, so they just deploy the new stuff, they try things, break things. If it works, great. Doesn't, they try something else. They are able to move really quickly without any problems. With enterprises, it's not that easy. So you already saw this picture today. These are the phases in the cloud migration journey. In the project phase, company usually try to get their feet wet. So they try first project, usually non-critical. Also, I have customers that went directly with a mission-critical core application just to make a big bang. Like, let's see if it works. If yes, let's do it. If not, we don't care. Then it's the foundation. So after the initial phase of the project is successful, during the foundation phase, they set up the AWS structures, multiple accounts, connectivity, security, and so on. It's called landing zone. After that, there comes the migration, and after the migration comes the modernization and continuous reinvention. When I'm talking to enterprises and they ask me, How to reach business goals with AWS? Well, after we go through this project phase and landing zone, the first thing, try to migrate as much as possible so you can free up your resources so they can do jobs that make much more sense than just racking and stacking servers, operate them manually without almost no automation. Adopt modern application development practices, especially for the new applications. Try to divide them into the smaller chunks, so-called microservices. You probably know that. You will get faster insights with analytics. I will speak about it at the end of the presentation. Got the security and compliance of companies that are most strictly regulated in the world and are already customer of AWS. Because regardless whether you are the smallest startup, you have access to the same services as the largest corporations in the world. That's what we call democratization of the IT services. Organize for speed and agility, so you have to come through some cultural change within your company. It's just not possible just to change the technology and think everything will click. No, it won't. And bridge the skills and experience gap. Here comes the educational part. So whether you go to the conferences as today, or whether you do any kind of training, whether it's on-site with our training partners of AWS directly, or you can do any kind of online things with third parties, or try aws.training page and have free access to the training resources. So first is the migration and free up the resources. During the migration, when you do lift and shift, or when the enterprises do lift and shift, they usually do very simple things. Simple from AWS point of view, not from the process itself. Simple, I mean, they use 4 basic services, or 5 probably. They move EC2 instances, the virtual machines, they move networking, they move some storage, and in best case, they use some databases. So they use RDS or something like that. It's 4 services out of 170 that AWS offers. But it's something that they have been using for the last 20, 30 years, so it's much easier for them to adapt to this kind of infrastructure. I already mentioned that once you migrate, you free up your guys to do something that adds more value than just racking and stacking the servers, installing manually operating system, and do hardening that's not automated at all. Once you have automation in place, once you can try new things, you can iterate much faster. So you can do projects that we're not able to do before. Here is the example of the optimization during and after the migration. So customers, especially large ones before the migration, they like to do the TCO calculation. Especially in Eastern Europe, the typical TCO, because the lower cost of workforce, lower cost of infrastructure, is not always in favor of the cloud migration, because it shows difference like 20%, sometimes even less than that. However, the TCO doesn't end with lift and shift. Once you do the lift and shift, you usually find out that the size of the instance that you originally set up and was reflecting the size that you had on premises was just over-provisioned. You can go with smaller instance and have the same performance or similar one. You have improved elasticity. If you have workloads that can scale horizontally, so you will just start the new instances, new resources, and shut them down when you don't need them anymore, you get flexibility and agility that it's not possible on premises. With services like CloudWatch, you can measure instantly what's happening in your environment, set up alarms or automated actions like these auto-scaling things. Then you end up with optimized EC2 instances. At that time, you have approximately 40% cost savings compared to on-premises. But it doesn't end up here. Then many companies move up further. They start to use the storage optimization by using different layers, different storage services, EFS, FSx for Windows, FSx for Lustre, whatever you got there, S3. Then they go to those managed services that are usually in the beginning of the migration phase afraid of. It's serverless, things like Lambda, API gateway, or containers, and so on. And they end up with managed services. At the end of this journey, they usually end up with 60% lower TCO than they had on premises, not to mention much better productivity of their people. Here's the example of one of my customers. It's MONETA Money Bank. It's fourth largest bank in Czech Republic, serving 1 million customers. They are focusing on small and business enterprises and normal customers, people, so they don't focus on the large companies. Originally established in 1998 as a GE Capital Bank or GE Money Bank, then in 2016 during the IPO they have been renamed to MONETA Money Bank. They needed to move to the cloud because they needed automated, scalable, and on-demand infrastructure. Basically, they had to kind of compensate the technical debt that they gained in previous years. So, what were the challenges? There are plenty of them. First was the regulatory compliance. In the Czech Republic, MONETA is the first bank that decided officially to go into the cloud with customer data. So they had to basically create the path for other banks in Czech Republic or in CEE. They had some applications live since 1996. So before the migration, they had to actually upgrade them on premises, and after that steps, they could do the migration. Internal team, they lacked the knowledge. They didn't have the experience with AWS. So what helped is to have a partner. They're working with them, give them knowledge, and let their internal people to learn on the run. And at the end, some of the people were very resistant to move to the cloud. So actually there was a path how to avoid them, or actually, do projects with the people that were willing to learn and do the new stuff. The regulatory requirements by Česká národní banka, that is a regulator in Czech Republic, had to be fulfilled with several steps. First were the contracts with AWS, which was the Enterprise Agreement, Financial Services Addendum, and GDPR Data Processing Addendum. But MONETA guys had to show to the regulator that they are compliant with other requirements, whether it goes BCM, Business Continuity Planning, with the exit plan, backup and disaster recovery, and security and auditing setting by using encryption on everything that they run in the cloud. Here's the example how the current environment of MONETA looks like. In Prague, they have 2 data centers, and they use Frankfurt as their region. Here, they use 3 availability zones with live, security, testing, and production environment, and they are connected with 2 10 gigabit lines for high redundancy, so they use direct connect to make sure they can communicate with low latency between all the environments that they have set up. What they did in last year, they migrated 20 applications as first to see if it really works. Seems like it did. They had to learn to think cloud way, because we had plenty of discussions there due to the fact that they've been used this on-premise mindset. Imagine, if you are on-premise, you have 1 data center as your primary where you run your workloads, then you have another one as a disaster recovery, but in the cloud, in AWS, when you have 3 availability zones, there's no reason to keep the other AZs out of the equation. If possible, split the load across all 3 of them so you can set up high available architectures pretty easily and not to keep just DR. This was one of the things that we had to change. And they end up with 3-pillar strategy. So now they are going with containers. They are going with a full automation with services like CloudFormation. And they use managed services like RDS, Lambda, and so on. What benefits they gained? First benefit, this was the first phase, lift and shift migration. They got already 20% savings compared to on-premises. Second, it takes only hours to deliver the infrastructure. Previously, it took 2 months to get a new servers. And last but not least, and this is the quote from their CIO from the AWS Summit earlier this year in Warsaw, where he said they got improved security with AWS than on-premises. And again, this is the CIO of a bank. Another customers that have been successful with the migrations and gained benefits are the news corporations, where they were able to consolidate from 56 data centers to 6 and gained about 100 million USD savings in the capital. And FINRA, FICOM. FINRA is a financial regulator in USA for the market tradings, and I will mention them a little bit more in the next slides. And GE Healthcare and FICO were able to gain benefits and do the services that were not able previously on premises. Modernization of applications. I already mentioned that. If any one of you has been developer for the last 20 plus years, you already know this monolithic, usually Java-based applications where all the code base is just one big chunk. You need to do one change. Most probably, you break up code of someone else. You want to do fast upgrade, you are not able to that. One of my customers, before they moved to AWS, they did one deployment per 3 months. Imagine that. With the cloud, it's much easier. And you cannot use new technologies because there is this existing code base, so what do? You continue with Java. You want to develop with Python? Sorry, dude, it's Java. Forget it. Once you decide to divide this monolith into the smaller chunks, you gain much more flexibility because you have only one thing that does something, does it well, and it exposes itself by the API. So you can do changes as fast and often as possible while you keep your API stable. You can do independent deployments, independent scaling, because you can deploy many microservices at the same time, and you can choose the technology. So if you want to develop in Python, in Go, in JavaScript, or Fortran or COBOL, if you want to, you can do it, as far as you expose your service within the API. This is the typical kind of difference between the cloud and on-premises, where I already mentioned it takes months of procurement and it's hard to try the new things. You cannot kind of innovate quickly enough. With the cloud, you spin up resources within minutes, try your stuff, let it run for a week, see if it works or not. If not, shut it down. If yes, go to production. My another customer, Pixel Federation. It's a gaming studio based in Slovakia, and they are developing free-to-play mobile games. Some of the games are here, like Train Station. I think they have now the Train Station 2, the new version, Diggy's Adventure, Emporia, and so on. So they serve more than 80 million players around the world. They employ more than 210 people in Bratislava's office. They are 12 years on the market, and last year they made $33 million revenue. So they started with the cloud, or we started the discussion about moving to the cloud in 2017 when they realized that their on-premises hardware is kind of aging and they have to make a decision whether to go to the cloud or order new hardware. They also wanted to start with things like Kubernetes, containers, and so on, so they were not sure how to go. And yeah, we started the discussion. And currently, they are still having kind of hybrid deployment. They were able to deploy the new games in AWS. For example, they started about a year ago new game in Asia where they didn't have to sign contract with any provider in Japan or anything like that. They just deployed the infrastructure in the Japanese region in AWS. They are running their own managed Kubernetes because they like to manage themselves. And at the time they started, there was no EKS. There was no managed Kubernetes from AWS. So they continue with that with kops and Terraform. They're using EC2 instances, of course, VPC, networking, of course, RDS, ECR for storing their Docker containers, Elasticsearch, and Elastic Cache. Also created a new CI/CD pipelines with containerized Jenkins, which is autoscale. So during the day, when they are pushing new updates from many developers, they run something like 4 containers at the same time. And during the night, when there is barely some activity, they just run 1. This is how their architecture looks like. They're using 3 availability zones. They have 2 load balancers for ingress kubedev and user interface kubedev. Here are 3 masters in each availability zone. They are set up in auto-scaling groups, so in case one of the master goes down, the new one is started. They have Kubernetes nodes across 3 availability zones, and in the backend, they have a relational database in high availability deployment, so master-slave synchronous replication. So the benefits that they gained so far is the agility. They were able to provision very quickly the resources, turn them off when they don't need them. Cost efficiency, we don't have yet exact numbers, but they are already seeing the cost savings. It's easier to deploy new CI/CD pipelines, and as per their words, their code is much more readable than it was before. And focus, developers now focus on the code, not on the infrastructure. So other customers, for me, it's interesting, this FINRA that created a stock trade validation system within 3 months. You have to keep in mind that this stock trade validation system validates each and every stock purchase every day, which is 500 billion transactions per day. That's what I call a scale. Coca-Cola was able to cut processing from 36 hours to 10 seconds. And other. Faster, deeper insights. We already saw some demos of the analytics, but with the cloud comes the advantage that all the data that your system produces, you can store them, because you don't have to take care for over-provisioning the capacity, doing high availability, doing firmware upgrade on your storage, and so on. Now that you can get insights of all your data, you can do analytics on the things that were not possible previously. So instead of checking like what was happening in the last 3 months, because then you had to delete all the data, there was not enough space, you can take a look what was happening in the last 12 months, what was happening in 2 years, and so on. And reduce business risks. Example is the Epic Games. Who knows Fortnite? And who plays Fortnite? Two hands up? Okay, I don't play either. It's not my age group anymore. When I would be 14, 15, then probably I would be one of these 125 million players around the world that are playing Fortnite. What they did, besides running on AWS, they created near real-time constant feedback. So they are able to see within a minute what's happening in the environment, whether there are parts on the map, on this battle royale game when the players are trying to shoot each other, they are too hard to go through, or they are too easy to go through, and they can adjust the level of difficulty to make sure that players stay engaged. And of course, this is currently the most popular game played in the world. Just an example how their analytics platform looks like, a few numbers. First of all, they ingest 92 million events per minute. For that, they have 5,000 Kinesis shards. You saw the demo of one, so they have 5,000 of them. Their data warehouse has 14 petabytes, and it grows each and every month by 2 petabytes. Their analytics platform consists of 22 EMR clusters. For those who don't know, EMR is managed Hadoop, so you can run Hadoop, Spark, whatever you got there. And they use for that more than 4,000 virtual machines, EC2 instances. You already saw presentations on the AI today, so I'm not going that way. You just keep in mind, once you have the data, you can get patterns out of those. This is where the machine learning and the AI comes very handy. So what is important to keep in mind, AWS or more machine learning happens on AWS than anywhere else. Security. Again, you had a session on security, but what is important to keep in mind is that with security on AWS and the services like AWS config that shows you changes in your configuration, with CloudTrail that shows you what's happening in your environment, you can get real-time insights, what's in your environment. If you were running stuff on premises and you were doing auditing, like which cable goes where, which server is connected where, it took long time, and second, if something changes the next minute, you didn't have this on this audit. You can see it here real time. You can set up alerts if something changes. If someone opens a security group of your RDP ports of your Windows servers to the whole world, you can see that and have automated actions that are called kind of DevSecOps, where the environment automatically is able to respond what's happening and, for example, delete this security group and send you notification through the SNS, whether it's to the email or SMS and so on. When we speak about security in the cloud, you have to keep in mind this shared responsibility model where AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud. That means all the infrastructure up to hypervisor level for infrastructure services. And you, as a customer, are responsible for the security in the cloud. What does it mean? If you put the data into the cloud, you can make your own decision whether you encrypt them or not. There is no reason to not encrypt anymore, so please do that. We give you the tools, but the decision is up to you. If you put the object or file into the S3 storage, by default, this object will be not available to anyone except the author who puts it there. You can open it to the world, but probably you shouldn't do if you don't want to share it with everyone. If you set up the server or start the EC2 instance, you are responsible for patching it. So if there is a hole in the security because you didn't patch it, it's your responsibility. AWS cannot be responsible for that. It's your task. I already mentioned the global deployment of customers like Pixel Federation. Currently, Amazon has 22 regions across the world. What is a region? Region is a physical location in the world where we have multiple availability zones. What is availability zone? You can imagine availability zone as a virtual data center. Why virtual? Because it usually consists of one or more physical data centers that are interconnected, and availability zones are in certain geographic distance from each other, so they have different risk profile. So the outage of one should not influence the outage of the other. And it allows you also to do things like synchronous replication. So if you want to have this master-slave database replication, you can do that very easily in AWS. Currently in Europe, we have, if I count it right, 2, 4, 5 regions. So you can deploy your infrastructure in Stockholm, in Frankfurt, in Paris, in Ireland, and I'm not sure if I can call it still Europe, in London. There are a few more coming in the next few months. So we are going to Cape Town, Jakarta, and Milano. Jakarta was somewhere here. In Milano, here's Bahrain that we deployed recently, a few weeks ago. So, if you, regardless of the path to the cloud, where are you right now? Whether you are just in the first phase when you are trying things, or you are already migrating, don't fear to speak with us. Speak with people like myself, solutions architect. We are happy to help you on the technical side, on your architecture, on your cost optimization. Speak to the people like account managers like Istvan in here that will help you with the business side of your journey to the cloud. Speak to our partners, to the TC2 guys. They will be able and willing to help you with that. And maybe in a year or two, your logo will be here. So with that, thank you very much.